One.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. My name is Catherine Halpern. I'm Chair of the Planning Board for the Town of Chatham. And this meeting is being conducted for remote participation only. And in a few minutes, I'll read some points regarding that. This meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 18 and is also being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing. Before we continue, I just need to ask if anyone is recording the meeting. It is all right to record the meeting, but we do need to be notified. All right, so continuing, I just want to read some points regarding our remote participation procedures. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A 18, and the Governor's March 23, 2020 order, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while it is in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. That's 1-508-945-4410, and the conference ID number is 643-939-587#. That's 643-939-587#. You can also join the meeting online using the Microsoft Teams app through the link that is in the agenda that's posted on the town website on the planning board page. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. And as I mentioned earlier, a recording will be posted of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. And in the event that anyone inadvertently becomes muted while you're speaking, you can press *6 on your phone. In that regard, I'm going to ask everyone who's not speaking that you would mute your phones or mute the audio on your computer and also disable the video on your computer. Except for planning board members, you should leave your videos on during the entire meeting. So planning board members, please leave your videos on. Others, if you would mute your phone or your computer and also disable the video, this helps with the clarity of the broadcast. So I'll just go through a couple of procedural steps that we need to take in our remote participation. I will begin with a roll call of all board members. I will ask if you're recognized by the chair to speak for non-board members, members of the public, that if you would repeat your name before you begin speaking, and if you're connected by phone, please repeat the last 4 digits of your phone number. And we do this just so we can always clearly identify each speaker. And after an agenda item has been discussed by the planning board, I will ask for any comments or questions from the public, from non-board members. And when you're recognized by the chair, you can speak. That means you can unmute your phone or the computer audio, and you can also turn on your computer video while you're speaking. And then, of course, please restate your name so everyone is clearly identified. When the planning board takes votes this evening, all votes will be taken by roll call, and we'll end the meeting with a verbal confirmation of adjournment, and we'll also note the time of adjournment. So let me start with a roll call of our board members. Art Sprue, are you present?
Art Sprue, present.
And Warren Shane.
Warren Shane, present.
And Tom Gagan will not be present tonight. Bob Dubus,
Bob Dubus, present.
Bob Wirtschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, present.
and Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, present.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I am also present. And before we go to our first agenda item, may I ask if any board members need to recuse themselves from any items on our agenda for tonight? Great. So no recusals. So the first agenda item are the minutes from February 8th, 2021. For the sake of time, rather than going through each board member, may I just ask if any board members have any additions, corrections, amendments to the minutes for February 8th? No corrections, no amendments? So then may I ask for a motion to approve the minutes for February 8th?
Well, this is Warren Chain. I so move.
And may I
Bob
have a
Dubus,
motion?
second it.
Second. All right, so let's do our roll call vote. Art Spru,
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approved.
Bob Dubus,
Bob Dubus, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, approved.
Roger Griffin,
Roger Griffin, approved.
and this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve the minutes from February 8th. So we'll go to our next agenda item. We have a request for release of covenant bond statement of conditions for two properties. Let's first do Hunter Rise. They are requesting the release of a road maintenance bond. And Susan Ladeau, are you presenting these? Are you present?
I am. I'm here.
All right. Did you want to just tell us about Hunter Rise?
Yep. I see Allie's put the subdivision plan on. We finished the road up a couple years ago, and it was all approved by the board and submitted our $1,000 bond for the 2-year maintenance. And our time is expired on that, or just about, or I think it has. And so we're asking for a release of that this evening.
Yes, basically it's just that the 2-year period has lapsed.
Mhm.
And I understand that staff has inspected the road and reports that the road has been maintained in good repair. So I'll ask board members, and again, maybe for the sake of time, rather than going through each board member, I'll just ask if anyone has any questions, comments, or questions for Susan. Any board
Catherine.
members?
Catherine, this
Arthur,
is Art
yes.
Sprue.
Please go ahead, Arthur.
Thank you. The only thing I have is it's a continual thing I have with the as-built plan. The as-built do not show all the information associated with the underground utilities that were installed. This is a requirement from our rules and regulations, section
Right.
5A15. Yeah, it says that all inverts or drainage systems as installed, all utilities as installed, all monuments. And I don't see all the utilities. There might be gas, electric, telecom that are not shown on here. It also asks for all the rims and inverts for all the structures, including catch basins and manholes. I do note that they do have them on the sewer and the sanitary sewer in the plan. Again, this is just a catch-up thing that needs, I think it's important for our DPW folks who will need to go out there and perhaps do some maintenance if they don't know that there's some other utilities out there. And you can't just rely on DigSafe alone. You need to really understand from a big picture whether there is only 2 utilities or 5 utilities, so you can chase them down. So it's important to have as much information on the as-built as possible. That's all I have to say. I mean, I don't know that it has a major effect on whether we released a bond or not, but I think it's important that the applicant do complete all of those as-built.
All right. That sounds good. Anyone else have comments or questions for Susan?
This is Bob Dubus.
Yes, Bob.
I'm in favor of having the utilities marked on a plan and given to the town.
All right. And Arthur and Bob, can I just ask you, are you in favor of releasing the bond but requiring the resubmission of the as-built with full information? Or did you want to hold the bond till? Yes. Okay. And Arthur, how about you?
I'll agree with whatever Bob said, which I couldn't hear.
Okay.
I'm not as hung up on the bond issue, but I think as long as the applicant says that they will go out, provide this other as-built information, then I'm fine with it. It's important for us to maintain good records on that.
All right. Great. In some ways, okay. Anyone else have any comments? Any
David
board
Clark,
members? Yes. Did you want to make a comment, David?
Yes, I don't understand what the issue is here. I'm looking at the plan that you're showing on the screen, and it shows gas, it shows underground utilities, it shows water, shows where the junction boxes are, the handholds, where the concrete monuments were set. What other information is important?
Arthur and Bob, I'll let
And
you be in conversation with David.
Maybe you have a different plan than I do. The one that was provided to me
Okay.
on application, I don't see any gas line on there. I see some boxes of where the electrical is in that, but it doesn't show where the underground conduits are associated with that. So I don't, at least the plan that I have doesn't have this information on.
Well, the one that's on the screen shows where the gas is, shows where the underground other utilities are.
So do you have also underground electrical and underground telecom? I don't see any lines for that.
That's indicated as just the underground utilities. They're in the same trench.
Yes.
So the gas and the electric and communications are on the right side of the road. The water is on the left side of the road, and the sewer goes down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And the gas is which line?
The one's marked with a G.
The G. I'm actually having trouble seeing it too, Dave. This is Catherine.
Can Ally make that? There we go. Zoom in a little bit more. Yeah.
I see the sewer line, but I don't see the others.
So to the right of the gutter of the road, you'll see a dashed line with the letter G.
A G.
Yep.
There, I see it.
So that's the gas line.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to the right of that is the underground utilities.
So it's U.
The U. So that is electric and communications.
David, I apologize. My plan is so small, I could not see that. So I do appreciate you clarifying that for me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
David,
Dave.
this is Catherine. I'll just second that the print that we got is so small, I think it would be impossible to distinguish those lines in those letters.
I'm sorry if you didn't get a full-size sheet.
That's all right. So it was hard to see. So
Catherine, I withdraw my comment then because the information I was looking for appears to be on the plan, and that's all I was looking for.
Great. All right. And Bob Dubus, are you satisfied? Bob Dubus, are you okay?
I'm happy with that.
Okay, great. So, great. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for clarifying all of that. So I think to what we know, the road has been maintained in good order and the 2-year time period has lapsed. So the board, obviously, as Ally notes on her staff report, we can either approve the release of the bond or disapprove. I'm going to ask the board, someone on the board, to make a motion to approve the release of the maintenance bond.
Catherine, I have one small little comment.
Yes, Bob, go ahead.
When you present a map that isn't oriented north it would be good to put an N on your arrow just for convention's sake, to know that we're
Oh,
not
yeah.
north to the upper part of the map. I don't, you don't have to do it again, but it's assuming an awful lot to have an arrow going down and have everybody know that you've turned the map upside down.
Yes. Okay. Good point. It's disorienting.
There it is.
Oh.
Up in the upper left-hand corner.
I agree. I saw it. It took me a while, and there's no north, so the assumption is the arrow is pointing to north. But that the assumption is that north is usually to the top of the map. So you've stayed with one convention, but not two conventions. So to remove the confusion, put an N down.
Well, that's what, there is an N and it's in the middle of the arrow.
Oh,
It's
gosh.
The same north arrow we've been using for
Okay, yeah.
25 years. And the reason why it's upside down is typically a road profile is read from left to right, Station 0 being the intersection of Barn Hill Road and going to the right. So that's why the plan is upside down from the topographic plan and the subdivision plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was never presented that way when we were looking at all the earlier plans too. So it was a little difficult.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Any other comments or questions from the board before we move to a vote?
Nothing. This is Bob Dubus. Could I make a motion that we give the bond away?
Yes, you can make that motion. But Ally had a comment. Did you want to remind me to ask for public comment?
No, you can if you'd like to. I just wanted to say that I did speak with Tom Temple, our DPW director, this morning.
Oh,
and
yes.
he was in agreement to recommend the release.
Okay, thank you. So I will ask if there's anyone from the public who wanted to comment on this matter or ask a question. All right, we have a motion on the floor from Bob Dubus to approve the release of the maintenance bond for the definitive subdivision plan entitled Hunter Rise Subdivision. And do I have a second to that motion?
This is Bob Wirtschafter, I second.
All right, so let's do a roll call vote. Art Spru,
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
and Bob Wirtschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
and Bob Dubus,
Bob Dubus, approve.
and Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine Halper, and I also approve the release of the maintenance bond for Hunter Rise. And next item on the agenda is actually quite similar. Similar request to release the maintenance bond for Jesse's Landing. Susan, would you like to go ahead?
Sure, same, actually David prepared this plan too, and our 2-year maintenance period has expired and we're requesting the release of the $1,000 bond, and the notes on the plans are the same. I think the orientation of the plan will be easier for you to read than the last one, but all the information has been included, and you've had the full-size plans at least 2 years with this.
Okay. So again, I'll just ask for the sake of time, if any board members have questions or comments for Susan. And Arthur, I'll just ask you, are you satisfied with the information on this plan, even though it's probably a similar situation that because of the size, we couldn't identify it easily?
Okay, so maybe I can just ask a question of David to clarify
Sure.
all the underground. I see the underground on the northerly side. I see water south side, gas south side, and underground utilities, I think on the south side, and the sanitary sewer in the middle. Am I correct, David?
David, are you connected? David, you might be, no, you're
Yes,
not muted.
Yes, you are correct.
Okay, that's good. I can see that now with the blown up version of it. So thank you very much. So I don't have any other comments.
All right. Thank you, Arthur. Any other board members? Any other comments or questions for David or Susan?
Catherine?
Oh,
Sorry,
yes, Ally.
This is Ally again. I just wanted to make the comment again that I did speak to Tom Temple, our DPW director, about this release as well, and he was comfortable with recommending release.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So in that case, again, we can vote to approve or disapprove the release of the maintenance bond. I would suggest that I would request a motion to approve the release of the maintenance bond for the
This is Roger
definitive.
Griffin. Motion to approve?
All right, thank you, Roger. Do I have a second?
Art Spruce, second.
All right, so Art and Bob Dubus seconded. So let's do the roll call vote. Art Spru,
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob Dubus,
Bob Dubus, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter,
We're chapter approved.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve the release of the maintenance bond for Jesse's Landing. So thank you, Susan, and thank you, Dave Clark.
Thank you.
All
Have a
right,
good night.
thank you. And I'll ask, I don't think so, but I'll just ask if there's any members of the public who wanted to comment on these matters before we move to the next agenda item. All right. So the next item on our agenda is a preliminary subdivision plan review. And this is for 776 Main Street and 70 Depot Road with Chatham Productions. This is the property where the old Monomoy Theater building is located. And this is a preliminary subdivision plan review. Before we begin, I do have presenters here for this, but I just wanted to point out, Ally and I wanted to point out that there is a correction that we need to note on the staff report that's been provided, and that is on page 3 of 5 of your staff reports. And it should be noted that this is actually a type B subdivision rather than a type A, following our subdivision rules and regulations. This is actually a type B subdivision. Ally, did you want to add any points to that correction?
No, thank you though, Catherine. Art actually brought this up to me today, so I'm sorry I made this mistake. But after relooking at our rules and regs, this is again a street type, it's B, and it's still a minor street. So instead, I think I put in my report that it requires an 18-foot wide roadway. It really does require a 20-foot wide roadway. So thank you, Arthur, for pointing that out to me. And I just wanted to make that correction known before we go forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Ally. Once again, Ally's prepared a very complete staff report with a lot of points that we'll go through. But first, I will ask, I believe I have presenters here who want to present this matter to the board. Greg Clark, I think, were you planning to present?
Yes.
Okay. Please go ahead, Mr. Clark.
Yes, so David Clark on behalf of Chatham Productions, LLC. So what you have before you is a 7-lot subdivision of the Monomoy Theater property and the residential dwelling on Depot Road. The property is comprised of 2 lots, namely the Depot Road lot, and then the rest of the property fronts on Route 28. Part of the property is registered land, and which is the Route 28 portion of it, and the Depot Road is unregistered land. So we have a six residential lots that are, I'm sorry, 5 residential lots. Let me back up one more time. 6 residential lots off of Depot
Yes.
Road. And we show a 20-foot wide paved road coming off the depot down the hill to a cul-de-sac, and the road provides frontage for all 6 lots. Typically, when you see a subdivision with a panhandle, as this one has, the lot width, the panhandle width is 20 feet. I know in the recent past, the DPW director has asked for a wider panhandle so we can accommodate municipal sewer and have the proper separation between specifically water and the sewer line. So we're showing an additional 5 feet for that panhandle. All the lots meet the minimum size requirement for the GB2 district, being 7,000 square feet and 50 feet of frontage. And also show the shape factor for all the lots, so it conforms to the shape requirements of the bylaw. We show in general where the drainage system's going to go, due to the length of the road just being over 300 feet. I think we show a intermediate set of catch basins coming off a depot to some subsurface leaching, and then down in the cul-de-sac we show another pair of catch basins leading to subsurface drainage. Municipal sewer is available on Depot Road. It's also available on Route 28. As I told the Board of Health, this project will be connected to municipal sewer. The logistics of how we do that still need to be worked out. Obviously, because Depot Road is so much higher than the cul-de-sac of this proposed road, we would have to put a force main in and pump the 6 residential lots up the hill. The other option is to go gravity through a easement out to Route 28, but that would mean digging up Route 28 and putting a manhole at the connection. So a little bit of logistics to work out there. As always, you'd rather have a gravity system versus a pump system, but in this particular case, we haven't made that decision yet because we haven't balanced out which way to go. And that's pretty much it. Lot 7 is the lot that fronts on Route 28. It's obviously most likely will remain a commercial lot due to the theater and the former residence at 768. It's oversized for this zoning district, but that's anticipation of continuing some type of non-residential use on the property. I did review the comment letter, all the bullet points that that the town planner put into the letter. We will show all that information on the final plans, specifically trees, significant trees on the property, and the rest of the drainage calculations and sizing of all the components, as well as details on the sewer and water service for the subdivision. And that would be my presentation.
Okay, thank you, David. And Greg Clark, you're also present. Did you want to add anything to David's presentation?
No, I think David handled it very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. So I'll just mention to the board before we get started with our discussion that we did receive a letter from the Board of Health, and I'll read that. On February 8th, 2021, at the hearing for the above referenced property, which is 776 Main Street and 70 Depot Road, the Board of Health voted to recommend for approval the preliminary subdivision plans dated January 20th, 2021, received by this office January 22nd, 2021, prepared by Clark Engineering, and that's from Judith Giorgio. And Ali, I'm correct that we have not received the letter from DPW Director yet?
That is correct, Catherine. We normally don't send out for smaller subdivisions, we normally don't send out requests during the preliminary stage, but I thought it might be good to just send it out preemptively, but we have not received a comment. So it's my recommendation, just so we're all on the same page, that maybe Dave Clark just contact Tom Temple to discuss the drainage and things like that, just so we are on the same page and have a cleaner discussion during the next phase of this application.
Thank you. Thank you, Ally. So I'll just go through the board and see what questions and comments you have. Ally's provided a lot of information in her staff report, and we can go through that in our discussion. I do want to just remind the board that this is a preliminary subdivision review. We will be having the formal subdivision review, which will also require a public hearing, and that's the time when we must require all of the detailed information and everything spit and polished. This is a preliminary review, and so we can approve or disapprove it as in a more general way. That's perfectly acceptable. But that being said, let's go through, and I will ask Arthur if you have comments or questions for Dave Clark, or anything that Ally's included in the staff report, or anything from your side.
Yeah, thank you. This is Art Sprue. I just want under Ally's lot number 2, she referenced that the panhandle section was included as part of the square footage of the lot, and that needs to be excluded. But there's another component perhaps to think about, and 2 of my comments have to do with, again, since this is in the GB district, and these can be smaller lots. There's a couple of the criteria in our rules and regs that might influence, and also in zoning, that might influence the lot arrangements. One of them has to do with parking. If you have parking on one of the lots, the parking has to be a setback of 10 feet from the adjacent property lines. So with the panhandle being 25 feet, if there's a driveway there, people are going to park in a driveway. You really need to account for that, because it's not going to be an enforceable issue. So if you want to comply with the setback there, you need to have a panhandle width of about 30 feet, 10-foot wide driveway, 10-foot offset on each side. Then if somebody parks there, they've complied with the setback requirement. The other thing is, again, these are smaller lots, and because of that, some of the other criteria that we normally don't deal with subdivisions sort of creeps into the picture here. And one of them is driveways are separated by a minimum of 50 feet between lots. Some of the cases here that might be tight. Again, it would be good for, on the definitive, that some of this is shown to show that it does comply with that. The other thing, this is a type B subdivision, 20-foot road. The cul-de-sac is showing approximately a 12-foot wide roadway going around. I'm assuming that would be one way. I guess just with our experience with the West Chatham Route 28 project, where we have 2 roundabouts where the roadway widths around are very, very narrow, and it does present a challenge. Most of our other cul-de-sacs that we've had, they continue with the 20-foot roadway around in lieu of the 12. That's my recommendation on this, because you're dealing with emergency vehicles, you're dealing with cars that may be parked on there. It's going to be a real challenge to try to circulate around a 12-foot wide roadway, as we've experienced with the new 2 roundabouts at West Chatham. Let's see. And if there is going to be a pump station, I would ask that, David locate where that's going to be. If there's an easement associated with that, so that that can be identified. That's about it that I have right now. The rest of the things that Ally had certainly are important. They need to be included. The only other thing I saw was on Ally's Lot 1 comment. She said that it has a frontage of approximately 1,774 feet. I think that's a decimal point missing there. Is that 177.4 feet?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, okay. That's what I assumed, but that should be it, Catherine. Again, these are predominantly comments for the definitive plan.
Perfect. Yeah, great. That's perfect. Thank you, Arthur. And that's really what we should be doing here is giving the applicant our comments in order to prepare the definitive plan. So that's great. Thank you. Warren Chain, questions, comments for Dave Clark?
Yes, Dave, this is Warren. I kind of endorse everything that Art had mentioned and that Ally has in the staff report. For my own education, as much as anything, is it the intention basically that all 6 of the proposed dwellings would meet the zoning requirements, or will you be looking for special permits / variances or whatever, so that I can get my mind set for when you have a definitive plan? Your intention is to conform with the zoning?
It does conform with zoning, yes.
Okay.
If residential use is proposed on these lots, it will require a special use permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Yes, that I'm aware.
Yeah, and then my comment regarding the parking, if you look at the bylaw, yes, the parking setback is 10 feet, but if it's a residential use, then there is no setback for parking. So residential use is exempt from the parking setback requirements.
Okay. The next question, or just to sensitize you a little bit, this is a wooded, heavily wooded area at the moment. And clearly many of those trees will have to come down. I think it would be very helpful if in fact there's a way to determine which trees will remain or which will have to come down, such that we can take a look at the overall effect of the subdivision on especially the appearance from Veterans Field, but also Depot Road, with the objective of trying to retain the specimen trees that are there, and as well as perhaps the plans that you might have for buffer strip, either between Depot Road and Veterans Field, to try and provide some screening both for the houses themselves, but also from those who are having to look at the new homes. Given that this is certainly a totally different concept than had been proposed when it was meant to be a way to fund restorations of the theater property. Just as a comment, I'm interested in knowing whether there is any intent on the part of the owners to try and restore, retain, operate, whatever, the theater buildings that remain, or is it merely to be another day, another question, and yet to be determined what they will do with those buildings?
Go ahead, Mr. Clark.
Yeah, this is Greg Clark. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with your last statement. So it's still to be determined. As we stated when we had our meeting with the HBDC, it was very clear from the meeting this past fall that most people don't think that there's a viability to a theater in the current environment. So we're not going to act on that immediately. We're going to relook at it in the hopefully next 6 months. Maybe with the vaccine, things have loosened up and the business world is somewhat getting back to a different normalcy, and we can go from there.
Okay. And just one last comment. There is one other structure that is on the site, which is probably in your lot number 4, but it is the practice stage, which is in the middle of the woods. This is quite a significant structure. I don't know to what extent permissions are to remove that, or whether it's your intent to somehow preserve it. But it's not shown on the plan one way or the other.
Yes, I see a hand raised, but I can't identify the person.
That's me. It's Greg Clark again.
Greg, all right. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Greg.
I think Ally could answer that. When we had the HBDC meeting, that question was brought up also, and I think the building inspector made the determination that the stage area out there is not considered a structure because of the height above grade that it sits at. Is that correct, Ally?
I am not sure about that. I wasn't at the HBDC meeting, but I would be happy to find out for you and the board, and I can email everyone tomorrow that information.
Yeah, it's related to it, I guess, only tangentially. There is a memorial, probably for the person who financed it, and it would be, I think, polite, if nothing else, to indicate in the plans what might be done with that memorial as the site is developed. But that's just a comment. I have no other comments.
Okay. Thank you, Warren. And Greg, is that your hand up again? Please go ahead, or is that Dave?
No, that's Greg. I can address that issue of the monument. So under our agreement, when we purchased the property from the family, they have the right to take. There's a monument there, and there's also another stone monument out by the theater that they retain ownership to, and we will be giving that to them before we do anything on the site.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. All right, Bob Wirtschafter, do you have questions for Dave or Greg or comments on any of the points in the staff report?
Yeah, I don't have really any major things to say other than I wish we had our new zoning in place at this point to encourage a more clustered design for this property, and I'm not sure that it's even possible under the existing zoning. But six single-family properties is inconsistent with what we want to do with downtown areas, and I just want to make that a note that something that was more in line with what we're trying to do in West Chatham would be more favorable to me. If I'm not sure I have any say in that, but I'm just voicing what I think would be better for this property. And my only other question is, how far is it from home plate to these houses that you're building? And have you given any consideration to broken windows?
And I see a hand raised. Is that Greg? Or I'm so sorry. It shows a hand raised. I can't tell whether it's David or Greg.
That was accidental. This is Victoria Clark. We had our hand raised from before.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Thanks. Is that it, Bob? You're done? So let's go to Bob Dubus then.
This is Bob Dubus. Looking at this, it's looks fine to me. We had alternatives brought before us, and this is the latest and probably the last. But my big thing is I went around, and I know Art Spruce said he wanted he was cautious about the road widening to 20 feet. Across the street where all the condos are, the road is 16 feet wide. I thought that was a little narrow, but it works for them. And there's more traffic there than there would be here. I also went down to Uranium Drive that Billy put in by, it used to be the old doctor's office, and theirs is 18 feet. And Munson Meetings is 18 feet. And Munson Meetings has an awful lot of traffic going in and out of there, and it seems to be adequate. We're talking 6 houses, and I honestly believe that we're going to see a runway there with a 20-foot road and a 1-foot berm on each side. But my recommendation would be to have an 18-foot road with 1-foot berms on it. I think it would look more of a neighborhood type atmosphere than a highway. And as far as the rotaries, I think, and they're roundabouts, excuse me, not rotaries. I think the cars going by now having a fair time on Route 28. And I think that a 6-lot subdivision is not going to create that much traffic. And as far as an ambulance, I think an ambulance could get in there. And I know for sure, even the rotaries that the roundabouts that we have, a fire truck would have a heck of a time going around it. And a fire truck would never go all the way into this rotary, it would, or roundabout, sorry about that. It would only come partially in and lay the hoses out. So I am leaning towards an 18-foot road with 1-foot berms. Leave the 12-foot path around the roundabout. And other than that, I have no problems at all.
All right, thank you, Bob. So you're actually recommending, because this is a type B subdivision, so a 20-foot wide roadway is actually required, but you're saying we could you would support an exception to that or a waiver?
Because of the traffic going through there is not going to be that much. And with the across the street having a 16-foot road, and they have no problems, the rubbish removal goes in there, deliveries go in there, and I consider a 16-foot road narrow. So I think an 18-foot road would be more than adequate for what we're doing, considering Munson Meeting, Uranium Drive. I think Hunter Rise, and I'm only throwing Hunter Rise in there because I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure Mr. David Clark could tell you what it was. And if I looked on the plan that's in my booklet, I could probably tell. But I think 20 foot is too much.
Okay, thank you. So I think next is Roger. Do you have any questions or comments for Dave Clark?
Yes, I do. Are these going to be condominiums or private residence? I mean, is it the condos?
If it gets developed as residential, there would be individual single-family homes on their own lots.
Okay. Now, the other, I mean, I was looking through my notes here. Did I see somewhere, Ally, that we had a note somewhere about sidewalks?
We do, yes. Ally mentions that, and I'll read it to you. Pursuant to section 5B11, basic requirements in the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land, sidewalks, the planning board may require sidewalks at a maximum width of 5 feet.
I got it. Okay, I got it. Okay, no, that's what it was. Okay, I'm sorry. I couldn't find my notes.
That's okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm pretty much okay. I guess I do sort of feel the same way as, with Bob on the width. It's you want it wide enough, but at the same token, when it's busy, you don't want people taking off and finding this new little cul-de-sac that they're whipping down and running around the cul-de-sac and coming out, because I think we've kind of forgotten how busy it can get, but it can get busy luckily things are going to get back to normal. And yeah, you don't want it so wide that people are, they found a new place to spin in and out. So I guess I wonder, I don't know, even for keeping with the neighbor, looking a little more cozy, I guess I do wonder maybe if 18 feet is enough. Other than that, I don't have any other questions.
Great. Thank you, Roger. So this is Catherine. So I just want to go through a couple of points that we looked at in the section in your staff report on page 4. Ally lists a number of things that the board may wish to discuss. I think we've touched on some of them. I think it's clear that we do want more definition about which trees are being removed. We want that clear when you bring the definitive to us. So everything clear on the trees. Point 1, there's this point about the buffer strip between the property and a butter. And it says that where streets or ways are laid out adjacent to and parallel with the property of an abutter, the board shall require a buffer strip between the proposed street or way and abutting property for part or all of the length of such street or way, except in cases which shall be deemed impractical. The width of said strip, together with the abutter's line requirements of the district, shall be not less than the setback district required in the particular district, or as may be specified by the board. So we just wanted to point out that in this case, and maybe Ally can put her pointer there, the buffer between the roadway and the abutting property needs to be, is it 15 feet? And it looks to be only 10 feet. So if we're going to go with the setback required and not another width specified by the board, that does need to be widened. So it means the roadway needs to be moved a little bit to the west. Is that the west? Yes. So that was one point. Also, I'm just scanning through here. The point about a buffer also between the property and adjacent property on the east side, where the properties abut basically Veterans Field. I'm just wondering what the board thinks about requesting that there be a buffer zone there for the sake of the visual from Veterans Field. Does anyone want to make a comment? Anyone on the board? Yes, Mr. Dugas, go ahead.
I'm looking at the subdivision plan, and it looks like they have somewhat of a buffer zone there already as far as where the buildings go, but I don't believe that that's our purview to get too rambunctious about.
Yeah, we could recommend it or request it. Yeah.
I would be happy to discuss it with the applicants, but as you know from the Hunter Rise subdivision that we presented that the board was outside their authority to require a buffer strip there, but the applicant in that situation did go along with the neighbors' request to have one and did provide one. Regarding the buffer right on the east side of the road, the sideline setback for the GB2 is 15 feet and the road setback is 25 feet. So the difference between the two is 10 feet, and that's the buffer that's shown there. And keep in mind the neighbor to the east is the town of Chatham. It's a vacant lot.
All right. Ally, did you want to comment on that?
I was just reading.
I see. Yes.
I was just reading this section further, but I can do more research into it and see. I just also wanted to comment, Catherine, I didn't know if you're going to go through each of the things that the planning board might want to discuss, just so that the the board can give some thoughts and comments about what they might require during the definitive. Like if you did want to discuss the sidewalks, if the board had a flavor for that.
Yeah,
And just so we give the applicant
yes,
our thoughts.
yes. I think that's a good idea. I think, as I mentioned, we've touched on, certainly on the trees, but maybe not on all the points. So let's just go through one by one. We've looked at point 1. Let's look at point 2. Regarding site distance, within the constraints of the property being subdivided, the road layout shall be situated so as to maximize site distance in either direction on the feeder road. Staff recommends that the site distance along Depot Street be shown.
Yes, we always show that on the definitive plan.
On the definitive plan.
Yeah.
And are there any questions or comments from the board regarding this issue? I think we need to see it. Okay. I think as long as you show it on the definitive and we can review it at that time, that's what we'll need to do. And point 3, this is about the trees, where there's a question as to the desirability of removing a group of trees which serve to add interest and variety to the proposed subdivision in order to allow for use of the land for a lot or lots. The board may, after proper investigation, withhold approval of such lot or lots. So again, I think the board has already requested that the applicant identify trees of a certain caliper or greater on the definitive plan. Do we want to specifically state what that caliper will be? Any comments from the board?
Bob Dubus, Catherine.
Yep.
Where do you want to see the diameter of the trees? Along the road edge or in lots?
I would say we want to, yes, in both areas, we want to identify trees over a certain caliper that they're planning to remove.
Well, if I owned lot 1 and I wanted to put my house where I wanted it, do you think that I'm going to worry about the size of those trees? No. Now, along the road edge, I think it would be possible to see what's there because we need trees every so many feet down the road. But on the lot, I think that you're asking people to do a lot of work. I mean, when somebody buys that, as we know from looking in River Bay, if you've driven through there, that in a couple of places, every single tree on the lot was taken, lot line to lot line, in more than one instance. So when the person buys the lot and they want what they want, it isn't going to matter. I mean, along the edges, I can see if you wanted to see it, but in the lot itself, it's kind of ridiculous because people are going to just take them out. And so to put them all on a plan is kind of foolish. Like I said, along the border lines, I would go with you on that. But other than that, I think it's a lot of work for nothing.
All right. Arthur, did you have a comment?
Yes. Well, it's sort of number 3 and 4 go together. I mean, I can understand Bob's point associated once you start building there and you put a driveway in, you put the building in, and you have some utilities that are going to be connecting into the house. There is going to be a fair amount of disruption, and several of those lots have contour changes on them to the point that they'll probably remove any of those trees too. But at the same time, again, these are smaller lots, and if most of the trees are going to be removed, and I would imagine that there's a fair number of them that are sizable. I guess the other part is more frequency of trees along the completed roadway. Now, we say 60 feet or less. I've commonly in my past practice, put trees at 35 feet on each side of the road, on center. And if that's a component of what we could do to waive this and say that as long as you
Right.
provide, approximately 30 feet on center or around on both sides of the road, I would say, okay, only because somewhat of what Bob's saying is true. The buildings, the contours that are changing, the construction is probably going to impact so much of the trees that to ask for that, unless it's along the perimeters of the lots. I guess, and while I have the microphone in here, because hopefully that Ally or David can help me with this parking piece, because GB1 says that the parking setback is 0, but GB2 says the parking setback is 10. So I didn't see anything in the zoning that gave a waiver to residential, but I might be missing something there. I mean, if it's someplace in the zoning, that's fine. I mean, you can go with it. I'm just reading what the table says on the dimensional requirements.
David, did you want to comment on that, or Ally?
I'll take a look at that.
All right. And I do see, Arthur, I would tend to agree with you about the trees, that what we might want to do is, ask for trees to be planted in those locations shown along the roadway, in lieu of maybe the procedure of identifying all the trees that will be cleared above a certain caliper. Is that what you're suggesting, Arthur?
I'm suggesting that. I mean, if the majority of the board is looking to have all those trees identified.
I think you're muted.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. If the majority of the board is looking for those trees to be identified, that's fine with me. But I'm looking at this from a little bit like what Bob Duda said, that let's look at the practicality of it, especially when you're changing the contours on many of these lots to a significant degree. The physical size of the house, as well as the driveway, is going to be removing that. I mean, it's going to be obvious there's certain things like on lot 6, a major portion of that lot is not going to be disturbed, and lot 1. But the rest of them, you're going to be doing an awful lot of work on those sites to the point that you might be losing most of the trees. And that's the realistic piece of it. So I'm okay with either or.
All right, great, thank you. And I see a hand raised, but again, for some reason,
Catherine,
it's
Warren.
Warren. Yes, please go ahead, Warren.
I have great sympathy for Bob's comments about let's not be too tree huggery around here. That said, I do think this is a site which deserves some special consideration by a developer with respect to the trees that are left. Unlike many wooded areas in Chatham, this is full of trees which are native or that they are at least not invasives. Some of them are even specimen trees. They're really quite mature, some of them. And I also think that, especially along the border with Veterans Field, it may well be that a number of the trees that are there could go a long way towards providing the buffer, the screen, whatever you wish to call it, that I think both a homeowner as well as a ball player would rather have. Along Depot Road, perhaps, and some of the trees that are there might well fit in nicely with what could go along the new entrance drive. I would not favor requiring the applicant to go out and label all the trees of a given size, but I would like the board, I would favor that we signal to the applicant that there is an interest by the board in what trees they might propose saving, and to perhaps mark those so that prior to reviewing the definitive plan, we would have the opportunity to see what they think might fit both with their plan as well as providing screening, as well as trees along the street. And one other comment, or perhaps question, goes back to the width of the roadway. I would again agree with Bob's comment that the roadway width could be smaller than the 20 feet. But then I have a question that if it, it is not a road along which parking would be prohibited, I don't think. I don't know that. But if parking were permitted, the narrower the road, the more difficult it becomes to have any passageway along. So that might influence my feelings toward whether the smaller road, per Bob's suggestion, which in general I'd agree with, makes sense, or whether if there's going to be parking along that road, that the 20 feet needs to be kept. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Great. I think I'd just like to poll the board informally about the tree issue to get everyone's say so that the applicant has a good understanding of where we stand. I don't think we need to take a formal vote, but I think Arthur, Bob Dubus, and Warren have expressed their views. So if I could ask Bob Wirtschafter.
Yeah, I'm torn. I mean, I think there's some really nice trees there that should be, and every attempt should be to mark and then try to preserve. But I don't know that we actually can ask that we have much control over that. I mean, from a planning board's perspective, I think the compromise that Arthur and Bob has stated is probably what we can ask.
You were cutting out a little, Bob. Do you want to just repeat your last sentence?
I think I'll have to go along with, I think it was Art and Bob's sort of compromise in terms of putting trees on the street rather than marking every single tree.
Yes, and I think Warren added that the applicant should note that there is a desire on the part of the board to preserve trees where possible, and maybe the applicant can note where that is possible on the definitive subdivision plan. So that also, and let's see, I think so. I have to ask Roger if you can weigh in on this particular issue of the trees.
I think I feel like a combination of what everybody said tonight, but as far as saving trees on the roadway, by the time they get through with the road construction, 18, 20 feet and all, even from designing the road, there's just no way they're going to save very much. And you're probably better off to put in maybe more trees and smaller specimens. I think really ask the developer to see if you can probably save trees in the middle of a lot. And we've been through this building, and even if you want to, you'd be surprised if we try how many trees you have to give up just because they have to be compromised with the construction itself. So as far as having any sort of saving the trees, I think we should concentrate on the buffer where the most good will take place, because I think doing in the middle of the lots and tagging the trees, it's not going to happen. It's going to be difficult for everybody to really distinguish which stays and which goes. So I say probably smaller specimens on the roadway, and let's stick to the perimeter to see what trees we can save and what sort of buffer we will have. That's the simplest way to go.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. Did I see someone else's hand raised? Again, I see the hands raised, but whatever version I have doesn't attach the name to the hand raised. So this is, Catherine, I'll just weigh in. I think the board, I think you're hearing, David, that there's a sense of a compromise coming from the board, that the board is interested in preserving trees, but we're not going to require that you identify all the trees above a certain caliper that are to be removed. But we would appreciate seeing that in the, particularly along the road and along the buffer, as much as possible, if some trees can be preserved and if that is indicated on the definitive plan. Does that make
Sure.
sense, David?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And do we
Okay.
have a consensus on the issue of a sidewalk? I just want to point out to the board that if you were to require a sidewalk, we have 20 feet of pavement proposed right now with 1 foot berms. So that gets you to 22. The road layout is 33 feet. So that leaves us 5.5 feet, I believe my math is right, on each side. ADA requirements for a sidewalk, I believe, is a minimum of 4 feet, not including the curb. There are also safety reasons where there should be a minimum of a 2 foot separation from the edge of the pavement of the sidewalk to the roadway. We would not be able to meet that here, and so you would have a standing curb on one side of the road. I don't think that's the character the planning board would like to see in a 6-lot subdivision where we're trying to minimize the impacts of construction. You go from a rural feeling to an urban feeling. So,
Right.
but, and then
Why don't
also,
I go through the board? Yeah, go ahead, David.
and the last thing was the 18 versus 20 feet of pavement.
Right.
We would
Yes, there
formally
seems to
have to
be-
request a waiver.
Right. And there seems to be some diversity of opinion on the board about that issue. So I do see a hand raised. Could you identify yourself? Who has their hand raised? Is that Greg Clark or is it? So let me go through the board. I'll go through in the roll call fashion, and we'll first, if you could weigh in on the sidewalk issue, whether you would be in favor of requiring sidewalks. So Arthur, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, okay, sidewalks, well, I'm a big believer in sidewalks every place. However, I look at issues as David has presented here, and I'm trying to look at this as realistically as possible. I think that if we're going to waive the sidewalk, then there's a couple of things that should be done as part of a reciprocation. I think go with the 20-foot wider road. That'll allow for parking, allow for people to walk on it. It's a little bit safer, so they're not crunched on the road. And I think the cul-de-sac, even though you don't want to go with 20 on the circular part of the cul-de-sac, then let's go to some other dimension, maybe 16 feet, as Bob mentioned before. I still think 12 feet to get emergency vehicles. If they come in there, they're going to want to continue to go around the cul-de-sac and back out again, and not back onto Depot Road. That's not really a safe way of the emergency vehicles entering and exiting, especially if this is going to be a new roadway. We should make it as convenient as possible for our emergency vehicles. So that would be the way that I would look at this. Also, if there are sidewalks on Depot Road, I would expect that the applicant would be, when they break in through them on where the roadway does connect to Depot Road, then the appropriate handicap ramps would be actually placed there at the roadway intersection itself. So trying to share what we should be thinking about if we're looking at waiving this sidewalk criteria. That's
All
it.
right, thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Arthur. And Warren, could you weigh in on the sidewalk issue?
Well, I guess I'm in favor of sidewalks in general, but in Chatham, I think there are a lot of places where sidewalks just don't fit, and I think this is one of those. I don't think a 6-house subdivision ought to require cityscape elements like a 5-foot wide sidewalk. So I guess I'm not in favor of requiring them and therefore granting a waiver for that. I do think, however, that the comment about the width of the roadway at the turnaround, I think, is quite valid. I'm not an expert here, so I don't know how wide a roadway the fire department would like to have, nor do I know what the center of that turnaround is going to be. If it's just grass, they can go over it. But I do think that's a more valid concern if there is no sidewalk. Sidewalk, to some extent, creates a way for a truck to get up over it onto a sidewalk if need be to get around. But in general, I'm not in favor of sidewalks in this situation.
Great. But you are in favor of the 20-foot wide roadway versus the 18, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you, Warren. And Bob Dubus, could you weigh in on the sidewalks? And I think you've let us know about the road width issue.
Well, I don't believe that on this subdivision, we need a sidewalk. I live in it's about a third of a mile. There's 30 houses in here. We have an 18-foot road, and most of the people walk around our neighborhood, and everybody's quite content. We only have one way in, like this one, and one way out, so there's not much traffic. I would go with the 18-foot road going in, and I would say a 14-foot wide at the turnaround. That's what I believe should happen. We're not building a highway. We're building a nice little neighborhood. I don't think it's going to get all parked up. I don't believe people are going to come off a Depot Road and just park and walk to town. I think it can be very controlled. And don't forget, we don't even know what the driveways are going to look like. So until it's done and shown on the maps, we're not going to know exactly what's going on there.
Great. Thanks, Bob. And let's see, did I ask Bob Wirtschafter?
No, you didn't.
Okay, please go ahead.
My problem is that we're trying to accommodate a very small property that technically can fit 6 single-family homes, and then we're asking to, well, the only way it really works is if we make the road smaller and we forget the sidewalks and we forget all the other things, and it just seems like we're constrained to try to fit the one model that really doesn't fit this space well, which is 6 individual properties. And I'm sorry to keep coming back to it, but if this was a clustered arrangement, we could put in sidewalks and a smaller road and get and not, you know, have better buffers and have more land. And it doesn't make sense to me that we're forcing this solution on this piece of property. So I really don't have an opinion about what we should give up, whether we should trade off the sidewalks for something else, because frankly, I think it stinks. And I'm not blaming the owner or David Clark for this. I think it's our fault that we haven't allowed other ways of thinking about how to develop the property.
I'd just like to David Clark here. I'd just like to reiterate that we are not asking for any waivers. The issue of the sidewalk was brought up by Ally, and as whether it was appropriate in the situation. We're not asking for a waiver because it's not required. It's the planning board's discretion of asking for a sidewalk where appropriate. And as far as the width of the road, your regulations say 20 feet, and we can show 20 feet. If the
Right.
planning board thinks 18 feet is appropriate, we'd be happy to ask for that waiver.
Okay, this is Catherine. Thank you, David. So again, I'll ask Roger to weigh in on the
Yep.
sidewalk issue and also on the road width issue.
I think, yeah, sometimes I think maybe we wandered a little bit too far. We had it down as 20 feet. Now we're deciding whether we have sidewalks or no sidewalks. If it was me, I would actually say for 6 houses, we don't need sidewalks, and I'd leave the 20 feet in place.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
Yep.
This is Catherine. I agree that I think for this particular layout and for the 6 houses, if they are going to be private homes on these lots, I'm going to assume that each one will have, individual access to their home, and they'll have a driveway going into their garage. And I don't foresee that this is going to require a lot of walking. Yes, I agree that it's good to have sidewalks for safety reasons, but I agree actually with Roger in this case that for this particular design, I don't think sidewalks are necessary. And I would prefer staying with the 20-foot width of the road and a wider width on the cul-de-sac, I think, again, for safety reasons. So David, I think you have some mixed opinions from the board on those 2 issues, but I'll just ask you to work with your, tonight is the preliminary. It's for you to get feedback from the board on what to bring to the definitive. So I'll ask you to work with the regulations as they stand and with your client to work out the best solution to the request that the board has made. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay, good. I think the only thing we didn't look at from Ally's notes are the issue of street signs. So I'll just read from point 5. When a roadway construction is completed, a street sign and post consistent with the type used by the Chatham Highway Department shall be installed on a post at the intersection of any new road or way with existing town ways and at all intersections within the subdivision. All streets not accepted by the town shall be so indicated on an additional sign on the same post stating private way. So I think, again, it's just requesting that you indicate, David, that the required signage will be present.
Yes.
Any comments from, okay. Any comments from any board members about this particular requirement for signage? Questions, comments? All right. All right, so I think we've gone through all the points at issue. Unless there's any other comments, I'll just open up any other comments from any board members. I do see a hand raised. Is that you, Warren?
I was waving. I didn't click the hand up.
All right.
But I had a question. I think it's, I have assumed that all utilities would be underground for this development. But I have a fairly strong preference that they be underground. So.
I believe your rules and regulations state that they should be underground unless impractical. But certainly, we have a utility pole at the end of the road. There's no reason to have overhead utilities on this subdivision.
Thank you. And Ally, is it your hand that's raised?
Yes, Catherine, thank you. That was my hand. I just had a quick question for Dave Clark, if he's able to answer it. In my staff report, I did put lot number 5, and I could have read it wrong, but I believe that the arc here, so the frontage says 48.22 feet. Are you proposing to use the frontage definition where you can measure at the setback and it be 80% of the frontage here? Or was I just, okay. If you don't mind, when you submit the definitive, if you could just put that notation on there, just so.
Yes.
Okay, great.
We always do, yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then
Great.
just one last thing for the buffer strip section. So that was when we were discussing the road with the abutter to the town of Chatham. It does say here, so the width of said strip together with the abutter's line requirement of the district shall not be less than the setback district required in the particular district or as may specified by the board. So for me, when I read that, I read it as it should be the setback, the abutter setback to the district. But David, we can discuss this offline later. But that's how I read it. But I can look back at other subdivisions
Well,
to see.
10 feet is what we did for Hunter Rise.
Okay.
That's my
So,
traditional understanding of that section of the regulations.
okay, I think we were reading it differently, right, Ally? So, Ally,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
Sorry, I read it differently, but David and I can look back at other subdivisions that we've done, besides Hunter Rise to see what was traditionally done.
Okay, and then David and Ally, you'll discuss it and clarify. And you can clarify for the board how we read that section.
Of course.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. All right, so if there's no other comments from the board or questions for David, and again, just a reminder, I think everyone's remembered, this is just the preliminary. It will come before us again as a formal subdivision plan, and we'll go through the public hearing and all of those steps. We can vote to approve the plan or disapprove the plan or approve with modifications. If we disapprove the plan, of course, we have to give our reasons. And also, I'll remind the board that the vote does not have to be unanimous. So with that being said, I would, since this is a preliminary, there's a lot of points that we've requested be included on the formal subdivision plan when that comes before us. But I would suggest that I request a motion to approve the plan, unless there's other discussions, other questions. Arthur, did you have any comments?
Yes, I would just like to make one amendment to that.
Sure.
Make a recommendation to approve it with the correction as noted in lot 2 that from Allie's report, where the lot number 2 is required to have 7,000 square feet exclusive of the panhandle portion. So that the preliminary plan would be, or the definitive plan would be modified to meet that requirement, that criteria.
Just that.
Yeah, just to let you know, it does meet that requirement. That 7,000 square feet is exclusive of the panhandle.
Oh.
But we'll make that clear on the definitive plan.
Okay. So as long as it's clear on the definitive plan, Arthur, do you think we need to add that note in our approval of the preliminary?
Yeah, I didn't realize, and we didn't ask this question earlier. If David says that it meets the criteria, I'm assuming that the definitive will then withdraw that amended add-on.
All right, great. And it will be so noted. All right, so then I would request a motion to approve the preliminary plan as submitted.
Art Sprue, I'll make that motion.
And may I have a second?
Bob Dubus will second it.
All right, let's do our roll call vote. Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, abstain.
Thank you. Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve the preliminary plan as submitted. I think we've given you our feedback as to what we need to see on the definitive. So thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Clark. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Have a good night. So with that being done, the last item on our agenda is just long-range planning. Just a few brief points. Regarding the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, Cape Cod Commission is still working on integrating our comments into a revised draft. At this time, we do not have a meeting date as far as the next time we'll be meeting with them. Ally will be following up with them later this week, so we may have that date. We may have a more clear idea of what the date of our next meeting with Cape Cod Commission will be after this week or after our next meeting. But that is where that stands. That's what they're working on. I wanted to mention to all the board members, as you noticed, you received in your packet a copy of our annual report from 2020. And I would ask all of you to, if you haven't already, to read through that. It not only summarizes what we did in 2020, but it does, as we usually do in our annual report, give a kind of a summary of what we still want to consider and what we're still working on and what we still want to do in 2021 and beyond. And so first of all, even though I just want to say to the board that even though we were in this COVID pandemic in 2020 and we had to meet remotely, when we prepared the annual report, we still accomplished a great deal in 2020. We made significant progress on the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. There was a lot of regular business that was conducted well, and we still have some of our other long-range planning projects in play, so we haven't lost sight of them, but we did accomplish a lot in 2020. Looking forward to 2021, obviously we need to continue with the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. We're going to see if there's a way that we can begin some other work and continuing with some of our other long-range planning initiatives, such as the scale and massing of residential structures, and maybe looking at our subdivision rules and regulations and site plan review criteria. But we have to see how we can work it in, and we're still working under some restrictions with working remotely, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in future. But basically, just take a look at that, and I just wanted to thank everybody for your very dedicated and very intelligent service to the town of Chatham. I think we've accomplished a lot as a board in 2020 under the circumstances, and I think we can look forward to continuing to progress in 2021 and beyond. So thank you for everything that you've contributed. Any questions on any of the long-range planning projects, or any points that anyone would like to bring up from the board before we close? And before we close, I'll ask if there's anyone from the public who wants to bring up any comments on anything that was discussed. So there being none, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Bob Dubus, motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Bob. And could I have a second to that motion?
I second that.
Thank you, Bob. So let's do our roll call vote. Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, approve.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve that we adjourn, and let's note the time as 7:35 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for participating,
Good night.
and see you next meeting. Good night.